As darkness settled over medieval towns, those who worked in the shadows emerged. They took on jobs no one envied, yet everyone relied upon. The gong farmer, ankle deep in human refuse, clawed through the filth of night. Tanners endured acrid fumes and blistering chemicals to gift society with leather. Plague doctors, with their haunting beaked masks, moved among the sick like grim omens. In the dungeon, executioners severed heads while miners forgotten underground risked burial by rock. Whether collecting leeches or battling swarms of rats, these figures of history worked with death close at hand, leaving stories cloaked in grit and tenacity. Embark with me on a journey to a world where life began in the intricate overlap of hope and dread, spun from the threads of blood and prayer. The medieval era viewed birth not just as a biological occurrence, but as a significant event steeped in mystery and danger. Women in labour faced this ordeal with both reverence and trepidation, recognising the moment as one of potential life and looming death. The lack of modern medicine transformed the birthing room, often an ordinary corner of the family home, into a dim, sacred space. Here the cries of labour mingled with muffled prayers, while the scent of burning herbs and incense filled the air, meant to repel the malign spirits poised to snatch the soul of the newborn. In this intimate setting, the village midwife stood as both guide and guardian, a figure of knowledge and mystery. She was often the wisest yet most uncelebrated woman in her community, navigating the treacherous boundaries of life and death. Lacking scientific instruments, she relied on a blend of skill and superstition, wielding charms, relics, and a keen understanding of the arcane. Her toolkit, filled with saints' relics, amulets marked with cryptic symbols, and herbs praised for their mystical qualities, was vital in her endeavour. Each birth was a journey fraught with risk, where an unexpected complication could swiftly transform the scene. From a cradle to a graveside, the midwife's role was seen through a lens of sacred duty and occasional suspicion. As stewards of the critical passage between life and death, midwives occupied a liminal space where the church watched their practices with a wary eye, perceiving hints of heresy. Despite these concerns, midwives were indispensable to their communities. They were heralded for their deep-rooted knowledge, passed down like an ancient guild's sacred trust. Their methods married practical knowledge with mystical beliefs, employing chants and prayers alongside physical remedies like poultices and herbal concoctions. In their quest to guide mother and child safely through birth, midwives might call upon saints associated with childbirth, such as Saint Margaret or Saint Brigid. This divine entreaty was more than a mere formality. It represented a profound belief that celestial intervention could tip the balance towards a favourable outcome. Yet, the boundary between legitimate faith and perceived witchcraft was perilously thin for midwives who walked a tightrope, where their reputations could hinge on the whims of fate. Regardless, most viewed them with respect, seeing in their hands the possibility of miracles, manifesting in the humblest of settings. The medieval child's earliest breaths were overshadowed by the presence of death, a relentless spectre haunting every birth. High infant mortality rates meant that no family, regardless of their wealth or status, was immune to the chill of its grip. The harsh truth that many mothers might lose their infants within days or weeks cast a sombre pall over childbirth. Communities crafted rituals to not only welcome the child into the world, but to prepare them spiritually for death's likely approach. In an effort to counter the grim odds, baptism was performed with remarkable speed, sometimes mere hours after birth. This was water's dual role, both life-giving and purifying, seen as vital to cleansing and protecting the infant's soul. The urgency underscored spiritual concerns while pragmatically acknowledging the harsh realities of life and death. The fragility of existence necessitated an early claim to divine protection, with the Church's blessing intricately woven with parents' hopes for their child's survival. Baptism became not only a marker of spiritual inclusion, but a sober acceptance of life's inherent uncertainty. Swaddling, a practice experiencing a modern resurgence, was a medieval custom steeped in both intent and meaning. Newborns were tightly wrapped in fabric bands, symbolising a desire for a contained, secure existence, free from the chaos and unpredictability that marked the outside world. On a practical level, swaddling provided support for a baby's fragile limbs, thought to promote proper growth and ward off deformations blamed on malevolent forces. Beyond physical health, swaddling carried spiritual and moral implications. Swaddling bands, often crafted with blessed threads or inscribed with prayers, encased newborns not just in fabric, but in divine protection and parental aspirations. Such practices reflected a core aspect of the medieval mindset. Every physical action resonated with spiritual undertones. Through swaddling, parents hoped to align their child's life with moral and physical harmony, steering them toward a future free from physical and spiritual turmoil. Thus, in a world where life was both a precious gift and a fragile venture, childbirth in the Middle Ages resonated with deep cultural and spiritual significance. It was a ritualistic passage, enveloped in mystery, duty, and a profound desire to forge a future amid the ever-present shadow of mortality. In medieval towns and villages, the absence of modern drainage and paved roads meant that streets often turned to mud, particularly in the rain-soaked climates of northern Europe. Picture yourself navigating these pathways where every step buries your feet deeper into sticky mud, clinging stubbornly to hems and soles alike. These roads, constructed from compressed earth and trodden by the relentless march of feet, hooves and wheels, transformed into thick quagmires during the wetter months. Mud was more than a nuisance. It was a persistent companion in daily life, snaring travellers and spirits alike. Yet amidst this grimy backdrop, life bustled vibrantly. Markets thrived, fairs brought joy, and the lifeblood of news flowed through these muddy thoroughfares. Townspeople responded to the challenge with ingenuity, building raised walkways in critical areas, or spreading straw to soak up moisture. The sheer act of traversing these streets became a small triumph in lives already defined by endless hardships. Mud was not merely an obstacle, it was a testament to resourcefulness, embodied in the nimble steps of merchants and farmers, battling the elements as they made their way. In homes, the story of filth continued. Chamber pots were a ubiquitous presence, with sanitation systems largely absent. Window-bound heads emptied the previous night's contents into streets below, mingling personal refuse with that of countless others. This unceremonious disposal might shock us today, but it reflected a raw necessity, revealing an intimate acceptance of life's unavoidable realities. Streets doubled as communal sewers, their function born of necessity more than ignorance. In an era uninformed about bacterial infections, lice were constant companions, thriving unseen within seldom-washed clothing. Rooms filled with the sound of scratching echoed lives lived too closely together, where sharing was inevitable, and lice travelled easily. These tiny lodges were facts of existence, not marks of shame, and tackling their incessant presence became a familiar chore. Although irritating, lice symbolised the medieval person's larger battle against pestilence, always on the brink of the next great plague. The Black Death revealed how these persistent pests wielded devastating power, yet they also shaped cultural practices surrounding hygiene and even social hierarchy. The scent of medieval life was as relentless as its mud. The air, heavy with smoke from countless hearths, mingled with the tang of tanning leather and the pungent notes of dung-fueled fires. Stalls offered a mix of fresh and decaying produce, creating a barrage of scents both delightful and appalling. Hygiene was a foreign concept, personal and communal smells coalescing into a pervasive olfactory tapestry that enveloped every town. Sounds accompanied this odorous environment, completing the symphony of filth. Medieval markets were cacophonous, filled with hoofbeats, merchants' cries, and the persistent tolling of church bells marking time or summons. The soundscape included the slosh of chamber pot contents and the scamper of rats, interwoven with the ceaseless chatter that filled these vibrant spaces. These sounds were less disruptions than markers of a society in motion, uninterested in silence, and far from ashamed of the noise their realities generated. Views on cleanliness diverged starkly from ours. Outward appearance triumphed over sanitation, with clean garments and neat hair more valued than internal cleanliness. Bathing was a rare luxury, more accessible to the wealthy, while common folk made do with face rinses and hand washing. Excessive washing was even feared, seen as an invitation to disease, confusing religious beliefs with scant medical wisdom. Water, critical for cleanliness, took on a different role. Scarce and often contaminated, its availability meant lengthy waits at communal wells and risky consumption from rivers bearing both life and waste. While some cities developed rudimentary aqueducts, access to clean water was never guaranteed. People adapted to these challenges, conserving out of necessity rather than concern. Bathing customs, though infrequent, turned social when they occurred. Public baths became venues for relaxation and socialization, though often scrutinized for perceived immorality. The well-to-do might indulge in private baths, while common folk experienced rough and ready versions. Spiritual and medical beliefs influenced regional practices, maintaining a culture of bathing, even amidst widespread reluctance. Fire played a decisive role in medieval life, a crucial source of warmth that left homes and inhabitants alike stained with soot. Smoke naturally vented through roofs but settled on interiors and people. A residue of survival marking their skin and lungs. Despite its inconvenience, this smoky world was inextricable from daily life, forging a resilient community of survivors within its shadow. Amidst this acceptance of filth, medieval innovations emerged. Basic sewers and paved streets surfaced, offering improved sanitation for city dwellers. Monasteries, symbols of cleanliness, led by example with strict bathing regimes and early sanitation systems. Such incremental advances underscored the medieval drive to better their environment, despite limited technological understanding, planting the seeds of future public health improvements. Born from mud and hardship, these voices of change shaped a world intricately connected to our own, reminding us of an enduring spirit that thrived within and beyond the filth. In the medieval tapestry of life, food was both necessity and a profound reflection of societal divides. For peasants, each meal spoke the language of survival, a steady rhythm of agrarian toil woven through every bite. Their diet, plain and functional, centred around pottage, a simple stew simmering with whatever vegetables the land yielded, with onions and barley as staples. On fortuitous days, a bone might grace the pot, its marrow a rare, coveted delight. The bread they ate was dense and coarse, a testament to rye and barley ground under primitive mills. Survival, not indulgence, marked every flavour and texture. The tiresome journey from seed to table mirrored the relentless cycles of labour dictated by nature. Fields demanded constant attention, and each hard-won morsel was birthed from calloused hands and aching backs. Cooking was a prolonged affair of smoky hearths, primarily borne by peasant women. The looming spectre of famine hovered, with failed crops driving families to scavenge for roots or herbs. Meals were inherently communal, binding families and sharing both sustenance and hardship. Eating was solemn, a necessary ritual of existence sustained amid scarcity. In stark contrast, the nobility's tables creaked under opulence, groaning with status-laden spreads. For them, dining transcended necessity, becoming a powerful display of wealth and influence. Exquisitely prepared meats, swan, peacock, venison, graced platters, enveloped in decadent sauces spiced with imports from the distant corners of the world. Sugar-laden pastries and candied fruits crowned the excess. Food as theatre, dishes often sculpted to delight or impress with their mimicry of castles or mythical beasts. To the modern eye, table manners might seem as alien as the spread itself. Forks were sceptical oddities. Hands made eating intimate, a tactile communion with food. Feasting was a social affair, alliances birthed amid the clamour of plentiful courses extending into the evening. Yet the lavish spread bore hidden threats. Without refrigeration, spoilage lurked, its rancid whispers masked by pungent spices. Nonetheless, these feasts filled halls with life, orchestrating harmony from the distances of hierarchy, uniting nobles in a shared indulgence that the peasantry could barely fathom. Bread, a common thread through all classes, nonetheless marked distinct divides. For peasants it was dark and heavy, the grains often adulterated with weed or ergot. This, paired with ale, offered scant comfort but necessary sustenance. Contrast it with the noble's manchet bread, refined, light and emblematic of status. Bread served even as a makeshift plate. Trenchers absorbed rich flavours before their final consumption, a reflection of both culinary ingenuity and stark class differences. The pungent embrace of spices added another layer of distinction. They signalled wealth and sophistication, their exotic origins a whisper of worlds beyond medieval ken. Nobles lavished cinnamon, cloves and pepper in their dishes, masking decay and ensuring a flavourful facade. For the peasantry, spices were distant rumours. Local herbs served more practical roles in preservation. Salting, smoking, and drying meats were enduring traditions that fortified against harsh winters and fickle harvests. These methods imparted their own distinct taste, one of necessity rather than expressed desire for adventure. Yet the resulting flavours told a story of survival and resilience, even as they underscored social gaps in access to culinary riches. Drinks provided both solace and survival. Ale was ubiquitous among the peasants, brewed by women known as brewsters. Its low alcohol content made it a staple for health over hydration, stripping away waterborne threats. Mead offered a sweeter, celebratory alternative. Nobles, however, savoured wine, a status symbol flowing from regions rich with vines. Hypocras, a blend of wine and spices, was common at noble feasts, highlighting the craft and chemistry in each draught. Drinks became societal motifs, underscoring the interplay of class, climate, and necessity. Religion steered culinary customs too, drawing boundaries between feast and fast. Church dictates transformed dining, intertwining spiritual and physical nourishment. Great feasts followed church holidays, signalling abundance where famine often loomed. Conversely, fasting restricted indulgence, levelling disparities through shared abstinence. Advent and Lent shadows wrought transformative patterns in eating, as reliance on simpler fare became universal, transcending class in the face of shared doctrinal observance. Medieval dining rituals were entrenched in ceremony. For nobles, banquets staged theatrical displays, replete with jugglers, musicians, and poignant service rituals. Food became the language of status, its elaborate presentation strengthening bonds within the rigid societal hierarchy. Peasant rituals, less opulent but no less significant, embraced community through meals bookended by prayer and customs. Food practices merged sustenance with belief, infusing daily life with meaning beyond mere survival. The medieval landscape itself informed every meal. Peasants ate the land, root vegetables forming their dietary bedrock. Coastal communities savoured fish, while inland foods mirrored regional strengths, from game to grains. For nobles, broader access to variety was a palette of plenty, an edible map of Europe's diversity. Yet food's sacredness permeated across class, upheld by superstitious safeguards involving herbs and relics. Even decay found charm under faith's protective veil, illustrating the medieval intertwining of life's dangers with its precious, unruly bounty. In irony's embrace, hunger and abundance danced, visibility cloaked beneath survival's stone face, each meal a silent sonnet to perseverance and passage amid the vast medieval night. In the medieval world, the concept of childhood as a distinct phase was fleeting at best. From the moment they could walk, children became vital contributors to their households. The notion of long, leisurely summers was a fantasy. Instead, life quickly ushered them into rigorous labour. A boy as young as 6 might find himself herding sheep, learning to brave the bite of the wind and the sting of rain with little more than his innate patience and resilience. Meanwhile, a girl might be steeped in domestic duties and spinning wool, brewing ale and assisting in the kitchen, each task essential to her family's survival. While young hands busied themselves, their minds absorbed the stern lessons of religion and the formidable spectre of divine retribution. Tales of hellfire became common educational tools, instilling a morality dictated by the sharp, watchful gaze of a demanding deity. These narratives were meant to steer children's behaviour, embedding a fear of heavenly chastisement that overshadowed simple childhood innocence. As years passed, this persistent shadow of divine judgment became a haunting guide, more permanent than any fleeting play. Discipline in medieval society was as certain as the sunrise, meted out with rods and sometimes harsher objects, the belief being that such measures drove the devil from within a child. Parents wielded these tools of discipline under the notion it was the truest form of love, a way to teach obedience and respect for authority. From a young age, children learned that their actions had tangible, often painful, consequences. This harsh reality ingrained submission as a virtue, an axiom that echoed through every tier of medieval life, ensuring conformity within this rigidly hierarchical society. For those fortunate enough to access schooling, education was steeped in strict discipline and rote memorization. Though often a privilege reserved for boys of slightly higher status or those bound for the church, education opened doors to different realms of opportunity. In stark classrooms, young minds grappled with Latin grammar and religious texts, drilled repeatedly under the implicit threat of a ruler's sting on their knuckles. Yet formal schooling, like other parts of childhood, often yielded quickly to family needs, thrusting children back into the workforce. The rigours of education, brief yet intense, left a lasting imprint, teaching both obedience to authority and a respect for the structured world. Moments of play were few and far between, emerging only on the periphery of work and learning. Children carved brief respites in their demanding schedules for games that echoed adult responsibilities. The toys of their world were simple and often self-made: cloth dolls, wooden figures, and basic balls, each item reflecting the resourcefulness forced by scarcity. Play was, above all, a glimpse into roles they would soon assume, their imagination a rehearsal for adulthood's burdens. For the noble-born, playtime occasionally allowed for greater indulgences, such as chess, falconry, or singing. Yet even for them, these activities echoed a future mired in duty. Chivalric games with wooden swords foreshadowed the diplomatic and combative skills required in adulthood. In time, the divide between noble and peasant play reflected societal roles, both wrapped in lessons of leadership, service, and survival in their respective spheres. Amidst constant labour, medieval children developed a resilience that perplexed both their peers and modern historians. Navigating a world fraught with natural challenges, they quickly honed survival skills. Understanding weather patterns, managing livestock, and confronting the medieval life setbacks, children became beacons of ingenuity from a young age. In times of famine or disaster, their contributions often meant the difference between survival and ruin. The children's social adeptness developed alongside their physical robustness. They learned the rigid hierarchies of their world, sharpening observational skills to navigate its complex social web. Children served as quiet eyes and ears for their families, amassing knowledge on discrete behaviour essential to their later roles. Through subtle negotiations with market vendors or tactful exchanges with feudal lords, medieval children honed diplomatic finesse, a skill set crucial to adulthood. For many girls, marriage marked the abrupt end of childhood, sometimes shortly after puberty's onset. Strategic unions were arranged, sometimes years before the couple met, sealing alliances or escalating familial status. These marriages hurled girls into the depths of adult responsibilities, with household management and childbearing as centerpieces. Boys, on the other hand, faced their transitions through apprenticeships or squirehoods, thrust into trades that would define their futures. These apprenticeships demanded grueling work and relentless dedication, sculpting skills and nurturing resilience, marking childhood's vertiginous shift into adulthood. Despite scant medical knowledge, harsh living conditions and poor sanitation, infant mortality rates stood grimly high, with only half of all children reaching adolescence. Parents lived with the grim expectation of loss. Grief was both a private burden and a public reality. Communal support softened these blows, allowing families to share collective mourning. Yet, each child's fleeting life, marked by a brief burial and poignant remembrance, echoed the community's valuing of life's transience and the fragile dance between youth and maturity. This harsh reality left children with little but the promise of religion. From baptism onward, children were enmeshed in a religious tapestry that structured their world. Saints became legends incarnate, and biblical narratives etched paradigms of virtue and vice into their souls. Religious rituals provided stability amidst life's unpredictability, offering consistency in the capricious medieval existence. While doctrine often felt heavy, children forged personal links with faith through shared stories and vernacular worship. Festivals lent rare moments of levity to this arduous existence, allowing glimpses of jubilation. These events wove children into communal traditions, celebrating their transitions from childhood into the adult fold. Yet any indulgence was tempered by messengers of faith and responsibility, a cyclical rite of restoration and reinforcement, affirming the continuity of medieval life and endowing medieval childhood with an ironclad legacy that resonates through the ages. In the dim glow of flickering candles, the barber-surgeon's chair stood as a testament to the raw endurance of medieval life, where cutting hair often segued into cutting flesh. These jack-of-all-trades, armed with nothing more than rudimentary tools like thin blades and blunt scissors, juggled dentistry and surgery in a world untouched by anaesthesia or an understanding of germs. Imagine these practitioners working swiftly, the clanking of metal instruments mingling with murmured prayers for survival. Each procedure a battle against the odds, as veins bled openly and teeth were extracted without reprieve, turning a simple ache into a journey through anguish. Amid lingering odours of sweat and blood, the barber-surgeon's proximity meant more than just pain. It was a grim dance where each backward bend of the knee or anguished clench of teeth told stories passed down through hushed apprentice gatherings and flickering light. Surgeries unfolded not in sterile spaces, but amidst the life's chaos, with stained aprons and the raw noises of iron meeting bone. Even the triumphs bore witness to humanity's frailty, accentuating a spirit resilient in its struggle against mortality's ever-looming shadow. In a society familiar with the constant thud of hammers on anvils and the call of the fields, injuries were common companions. Teeth, often victims to decay, brought forth an agony that no chanting or herb could ease fully. A toothache turned sinister, invoking not just personal torment, but a communal dread of pure, unfiltered suffering. Without modern comforts, people faced the elements bare, compelled to rely on make-do cures. The herbs and folk remedies of the time, wrapped in layers of superstition, did little but mask the deeper pain that gnarled through society's veneer. Across landscapes stitched with toil, wounds of every variety coexisted with the calloused hands that forged and harvested. Each cut and bruise was a story added to the communal tapestry, a reminder of life's unpredictable force. Legs buckled under the burden, and arms bore scars of an existence where even leisure was seasoned with a hint of labour. In a time unacquainted with safety regulations, injuries bore consequences far beyond the physical. Survival depended on the body's capacity for healing, a testament to the resilience forged in fields and workshops. Against this backdrop flowed the eerie interplay of leeches and bloodletting, deeply rooted in a belief that harmony resided in balancing the humours: blood, phlegm, black and yellow bile. It was an art both feared and revered, as skilled hands bled patients with a conviction fostered by ancient texts. Ironically, these acts of faith sometimes brought closure too early, steering individuals closer to the very oblivion they sought to evade. Yet they highlight a time striving to orchestrate the chaotic ebb and flow of life through practices steeped in mystery and an innate grasp of rhythm. Here infection sang a curious tune, where pus was paradoxically celebrated and feared. Considered both a troubling sight and a promising sign of recovery, the medieval understanding of infection spoke of an intimacy with the body's rhythms beyond mere empathy. In literature, metaphors bloomed around decay and renewal, painting a vivid juxtaposition of fear and fascination, where even the most grotesque aspects of the body held a perverse allure, tracing a circle back to resilience. Within dwellings brimming with whispered prayers and clinking amulets, medieval folk wove safety nets of herbs and charms, merging natural remedies with the supernatural. Chamomile and sage lived alongside incantations and handcrafted protection, reflecting a belief system where the physical and mystical entwined seamlessly. Community healers, guardians of forgotten knowledge, chanted over concoctions, harmonizing earthly and otherworldly realms, cementing a relationship between nature's sanctuary and human adversity's daunting face. Faith, a formidable ally, stood intertwined with healing, assigning each ailment a role in a divine narrative. Monasteries acted as havens, merging prayer with treatment, inviting healing through spiritual intervention. Pilgrims seeking solace and salvation, bathed in the belief that their hardships were part of a grander design. Saints served as intermediaries in this celestial dance, their stories weaving hope into the daily life's grueling fabric, affirming that pain and redemption walked hand in hand against a backdrop of unyielding faith. The mind, as vulnerable as the flesh, was often touched by a spiritual brush, its disorders seen as both divine censure and supernatural interference. Episodes of madness summoned intercessions of prayer, suspicion, and sometimes condemnation, reflecting a community poised between compassion and fear. Stories lingered in archives, hinting at a world where psychological turmoil provoked responses varying from isolation to sheltering. Within the community's arms or solitude's embrace, a dichotomy shadowed by mysticism. Engagement with life's gritty essence shaped an existence where survival relied on navigating a world defined by resilience and grit. Flowers' coarse embrace and roads' jarring resilience were more than physical trials. They were imbued with meaning, weaving stories into manuscripts and songs. Beneath grime-lined nails and calloused palms lay the echoes of a saga, a testament to an era's undying fortitude, against which everything, even hope, held a bittersweet edge. Amid struggle, hope flourished, threading through the fabric of medieval life, reassuring those who dared to look beyond the immediate that beyond every trial lay a promise of triumph and resilience. In the Middle Ages, faith was more than a personal belief. It was the very air people breathed. Every moment of life was marked by a sense of divine presence. Church bells rang out, calling the faithful to prayer and reminding them of their place within the cosmic order. These bells were not mere signals for service. They were celestial notes imposing harmony on a world teetering on chaos. Regardless of status, from the humblest peasant to the highest lord, faith demanded observance and reverence, knitting society together with its sacred thread. Religious rituals and ceremonies infused the rhythm of everyday life. Each day was an opportunity to acknowledge God's presence, as actions from waking to eating were entwined with devotion. The church was a cornerstone of life, spiritually, socially, and administratively. With feast days and saints' celebrations painting the medieval calendar, life unfolded against a backdrop of communal gatherings. Faith was not just a personal journey, it was a shared experience as essential as it was unavoidable. Medieval minds were captivated by visions of heaven and hell, realms as tangible as the earth they worked and the sky they looked to for signs. Heaven represented eternal peace, a reward for the devout. whereas hell's fiery depths were a constant threat used by the church to keep congregations in line. Vivid depictions in sermons and artworks made these places feel palpably near. Such imagery guided moral choices and everyday actions, keeping the focus steadily on divine judgment. Clergy wielded the promise of heaven and the threat of hell, emphasizing the peril of sin and the virtuous path to avoid it. Paintings and sermons on damnation ensured that even mundane actions bore eternal significance. This belief system fostered practices like confession and penance, reinforcing both ecclesiastical authority and the necessity of spiritual cleansing. Medieval folk lived in a world where spiritual stakes were as real as those of flesh and bone. Saints served as vital intermediaries with the divine, holy figures closer to God, and so trusted to intercede on behalf of the faithful. Their cults added a personal touch to devotion, each saint representing specific virtues or patrons of causes and trades. Relics, physical remnants associated with saints, became central to invoking their power. Enshrined in ornate reliquaries, these objects drew pilgrims from afar, transforming towns into bustling centres of spiritual and economic activity. To the medieval mind, relics held tangible divine potency, capable of manifesting miracles and protection. Miracles, when they occurred, were accepted not with scepticism but as signs of divine benevolence. In times of crisis, when plagues or famine struck, hope often rested on these miraculous events. While medieval medicine may have been lacking, the promise of divine intervention offered reassurance and resolve. Miracles stood as testament to a supernatural presence in the world, bridging the often insurmountable gap between human suffering and celestial grace. The church dominated daily life, far more than any modern institution, acting as the epicenter of education and governance. Monasteries and convents preserved and dispensed knowledge across subjects ranging from theology to the rudiments of science. Clergy were community leaders, weaving spiritual, educational, and civic roles into their daily interactions. Their influence extended into all aspects of life, from marriage disputes in ecclesiastical courts to celebrations punctuating the passage of seasons. This omnipresence shaped laws, cultural norms, and social hierarchies alike. Medieval churches were not solely sacred spaces, but grand symbols of divine authority on earth. These architectural wonders, with their soaring facades and intricate stained glass, told biblical stories in a visual language everyone could understand. Artistic works in these spaces transformed worship into a sensory immersion, with the tones of choral music and the light of colourful windows guiding the soul toward the divine. Beyond the structured rituals of the church, medieval life was steeped in superstition. Charms, amulets, and gestures coexisted alongside Christian doctrine, reflecting a fusion of pagan and Christian practices. These cultural rites formed a rich folklore, providing comfort and structure in an unpredictable world where the mystical and divine were deeply interwoven. Tithing, a church-mandated tax, formed a significant part of religious life, demanding a portion of income or produce. Despite being a burden on many, failing to pay tithes wrought severe community repercussions. Pilgrimages, another vital aspect of faith, represented not only personal devotion, but communal religious expression. These journeys, whether to nearby shrines or distant holy lands, demonstrated a collective fervour that unified the medieval world. Clerical figures were the community's spiritual guides and administrators, bridging the earthly and divine. Literacy provided clergy with high standing, allowing them to wield influence in all societal spheres. Some clergy exemplified virtues while others exploited their power. Yet their roles were irreplaceable, overseeing life's critical rites and providing solace amid suffering, anchoring society in an intricate web of faith and tradition. Religion offered a paradoxical existence. It restrained with strictures, yet liberated with the promise of salvation. Fear of hell and excommunication regulated behaviour, yet at the same time, faith offered sanctuary and hope of eternal reward. This duality, ensnaring and freeing in equal measure, revealed the profound complexities of the medieval quest for meaning and order amid life's uncertainties. If this exploration into the strange, faith-driven world of the Middle Ages sparked your intrigue, or perhaps made you grateful for modern comforts, leave us a like. For more tales of history's dark, curious corners, subscribe to Medieval Grime. We savour history raw, hearty, and with a dash of mischief. Thanks for joining us. Stay gritty, and see you next time by the fire. In the shadowy annals of the Middle Ages, justice wore a grim visage. It was a time when the thin veneer of civilization rested on the shoulders of a justice system that was as much about fear as fairness. The world back then was a volatile place, teetering continually on the brink of chaos, and the law maintained order through an array of punishments, as brutal as they were public. Breaking the law wasn't just an offence against one's fellow man, it was considered a slap in the face to the divine order itself, a blasphemous act that demanded recompense not just on earth, but in the heavens. This judicial theatre played out in town squares that doubled as stages for a grim kind of social drama. When someone was sentenced, the entire community witnessed it, reinforcing the social norms through these chilling displays. The gallows didn't just execute the guilty, they etched a vivid reminder into the community's collective memory. The stocks and pillories turned punishment into a public event, a stark warning that defiance came with a steep price. Medieval trials were steeped in strange rituals. Trials by ordeal, rituals that pitted accused individuals against the elements or their own endurance, were commonplace. The divine supposedly judged your innocence or guilt. Imagine carrying a hot iron a certain distance, or being plunged into icy waters. If the burns healed or if you sank and didn't float, divine intervention confirmed innocence. In a world where God's will was believed to be as tangible as the earth beneath one's feet, such methods seemed perfectly reasonable. Theft carried its own merciless retribution. A mere loaf of bread, if stolen, could cost you a hand. This harsh retaliation wasn't only about the crime, it was about maintaining a delicate balance in a society where every grain, every resource, mattered. In tight-knit communities, theft was a breach of trust so severe it threatened survival. Losing a hand was a loud, visible warning to others, a reminder of the fragile social and economic truce that held everyone together. Blasphemy, meanwhile, was a sin that shook the very fabric of moral belief to its core. With the church holding sway over the soul's eternal destination, any profanity against its sacred doctrines was intolerable. The stocks were a preferred punishment for such transgressions, subjecting blasphemers to long hours of exposure and humiliation. It was the kind of punishment that seeped into one's very bones, not because of physical pain, but due to the social ostracism it engendered. Public involvement in shaming these individuals highlighted the community as both judge and jury, taking part in reinforcing a steadfast allegiance to faith and moral order. Medieval jails were less about rehabilitation and more about raw survival. Often they were mere holding cells filled with the stench of squalor. Disease was rampant, and the facilities hardly met basic needs. The darkness of these dungeons, literal and metaphorical, mirrored the unforgiving nature of justice during these times. The ultimate demonstration of justice, or perhaps injustice, was the public execution, a veritable festival of fear. Here in the town square, livelihoods were abruptly ended before an audience both horrified and fascinated. The clergyman would bless the event, and the executioner, with their tools of death gleaming ominously, was the centerpiece of a macabre ritual. Branding and mutilation were common fates for repeat offenders or those whose actions sharply tested the patience of their peers. These cruel penalties left visible scars marking individuals as perpetual criminals. Their lives henceforth were defined by those scars no matter where they went. This practice was an indelible way of ensuring that the stigma of one's sins followed them, whispering a warning to all about the cost of moral and legal failure. Laws varied widely across regions, often reflecting local values more than universal principles of fairness. Though many relied on brutal force and deep-seated religious beliefs, this was not uniform. Power-holding lords and councils often manipulated justice for their own ends. It was a world where justice was applied with the heavy hand of personal agenda, where the law served the powerful just as much as, if not more than, the principle of equity. For the nobility, conflicts often involved genteel but no less dire consequences. Instead of immediate corporal punishment, noble disputes could spiral into political feuds or even skirmishes, with entire armies swaying the scales that determined a verdict. This created a dichotomy where justice's face changed depending on social standing. For peasants, judgment was swift and severe. For the lords, it balanced precariously on negotiation, influence, and latent warfare. In this public tapestry of medieval life, guilt was never a private affair. The punishment and ritual surrounding it were deeply ingrained in the cultural psyche. It formed a communal bond, a shared understanding woven into the daily rhythm. Justice, or its medieval approximation, was as omnipresent and unavoidable as the church bell tolling out the hours, a stern reminder hanging like a thundercloud over everyone's heads, continuously asserting order through fear, spectacle, and perhaps a quiet resignation. In the medieval world, who you were was intimately tied to what you did. From the peasant tilling fields under the watchful sky to the blacksmith hammering iron into shape, your occupation was your identity, governing your standing, your daily rituals, and your place within the intricate web of community life. Jobs weren't just passed down, they were inherited. Sons following fathers, daughters learning from mothers, in a rich tapestry where every role, however humble, held essential threads of survival. Imagine a place where work was not just 9 to 5, but a lifetime devotion, each task imbued with purpose. Every occupation demanded its own particular skills, shaping both hands and lives. Within this world, a dairy maid rose with the sun, her existence interwoven with the rhythm of milk and cheese. Meanwhile, the stone mason, his hands worn and calloused, gave shape to the soaring churches that dotted the medieval skyline. Even the lowly rat catcher served an essential purpose, safeguarding grain from gnawing pests. Status and recognition were earned in this relentless world, where a master craftsman, crowned by guild membership, held sway and commanded respect and reward. Yet beneath this structured order, the relentless grind of feudal obligation never ceased, propelling progress as it claimed sweat and devotion in equal measure. guilds stood as mighty pillars in this landscape, wielding influence over the lives of artisans like ancient trade unions, dictating standards and safeguarding their crafts from outside encroachment. For many craftsmen, the guild was more than an economic boon. It was a protective embrace, a brotherhood offering security and a sense of belonging. But ranks within the guild required patience and mastery, culminating in the creation of a masterpiece, a testament to skill and perseverance. Such rigorous demands ensured the high quality of goods that prospered local economies like ironworks and textiles, assiduously crafted to perfection. But guilds were more than just economic agents. They played a crucial role in the cultural and political tapestry of their towns, their members intertwined with governance and community life. Captivating ceremonies paid homage to patron saints, their festivals weaving the sacred into the secular fabric of daily existence. However, this influence was a double-edged sword, as guilds could also act as gatekeepers, stifling outsiders and stifling dissent with an iron grip. In towns where commerce reigned, guilds were the power players, their decisions shaping much of the social order and town life. For the majority, however, life under the feudal system had its own harsh truths, where labour extended beyond personal survival to underpin the fortunes of lords and masters. The army of peasants, essential yet marginalised, worked tirelessly on lands they neither owned nor claimed, often mere tenants under noble or ecclesiastical authority. Tied to the rhythms of planting, tending and harvesting, these workers toiled endlessly through cycles that dictated their meagre existence, with survival hanging in delicate balance to nature's fickle whims. Life held paradoxes, with pockets of free villages where peasants carved more autonomy, their successes celebrated in festivals that blurred societal ranks and fostered community unity. Yet such instances were rare jewels amidst a backdrop where most laboured relentlessly, walks of life bound to the shadow of their master's domain. Work's rigours evidenced deeply upon weathered skin and weary souls, each scar a testament to survival's harsh demands. Women and children, though vital to this medieval mosaic, often found their efforts unheralded. Women juggled myriad roles, from tending livestock and gardens to brewing ale and managing households. Essentially, trustees of pivotal, industrious frontiers, their contributions were sometimes marked anonymously by social conventions. Children too were folded into the labour force early, their innocence supplanted by necessity, their tiny hands weaving into the tapestry of sustenance and expectation. In a landscape where survival pressed heavy upon all, their small shoulders bore burdens both tangible and symbolic, maturing them beyond their tender years. Apprenticeships formed the backbone of craftsmanship, a rite of passage that took boys from novices to masters. Starting young, they worked beneath their master's eye, absorbing trade's tricks, ethics and nuances. Their days were long, their duties demanding, yet this journey was the key to eventual independence and acclaim. The progression from apprentice to journeyman held the promise of a greater freedom, the chance to roam and refine skills, saving for a hopeful future guild membership and the launch of their own establishment. As seasons turned, life teetered between feast and famine. Abundant harvests fueled communal celebrations, the air thick with joy and feasting, shared sustenance triggering vibrant community euphoria. Yet when crops withered or war disrupted, famine cut into the heart of life, hunger breaching defences as a reminder of life's fragility. The work ceased when bellies cried hollow and people turned to land and resourcefulness, until new beginnings bloomed in the wake of hardship. In contrast, The nobility lived lives of strange duality, their labour intertwined with leisure and governed by courtly pursuits. Hunting and falconry were extensions of their noble duty, while banquets and tournaments spun tapestries of alliance and chivalry. Each indulgence hid veils of responsibility, as estates operated under their meticulous oversight, landscapes shaped by both pleasure and political machination. Thus the echoes of medieval labour hum softly through history, a legacy of hard-earned wisdom and resilience carried into the present. From the endeavours of yore sprang the roots of modern configurations and cultural advances, the persistent spirit of enterprise that continues to define humanity's relentless dance with purpose and toil. As the sun dipped below the horizon, medieval villages fell under a cloak of darkness, turning familiar paths into mysterious trails. Without electric lights, twilight painted the sky in haunting shades of purple and blue, casting long shadows over cobblestone streets. People hurried inside, seeking refuge by the hearth as the comforting warmth danced over worn stone walls. The world outside was a tangle of sounds, a distant wolf howl, the wind's soft murmur, nocturnal creatures stirring to life. Night was a realm where reality blurred with the fantastical, where stories of spirits wove into the fabric of collective belief. The chilling night air made every crack of a branch, every hoot of an owl, feel alive with possibilities. Villages fell into a tense hush, awaiting the dawn's return. Within this darkness, fire served as both sentinel and companion. Hearths crackled warmly inside homes, sending flickering light through small windows, a beacon against the pressing gloom. Families gathered close, sharing meals and tales, the flames painting stories on their faces. Fire was precious. It defied the sensory deprivation that came with night, its crackling reminding all of human presence amid the vast unknown. By the hearth, families found comfort in the warmth, spinning yarns of history and myth, letting imagination take flight against the backdrop of flickering shadows. Yet fire, a cherished guardian, also held the power of devastation. One careless spark could spell ruin for thatched roofs and wooden walls, a danger that loomed even in protection's embrace. Campfires in the wild were a talisman against predators, their light warning off wolves and human threats alike. In castles, torches burned brightly, casting their glow over stone battlements, a shield against the encroaching blackness beyond fortress walls. The Night Watch played a vital role, patrolling streets now silent under the quiet of night. They carried lanterns, their steady footfalls a reassuring presence against chaos's lurking potential. Men armed with whistles or horns stood ready to call for aid should danger rear its head, preserving order amid shadows. The whispers of the night were kept at bay by these sentinels, whose vigilance drew a boundary between safety and the unseen threats prowling just beyond the edge of light. Their eyes knew every secret alley and covert meeting place, an intricate knowledge of city life that defined their nocturnal patrol. Yet beyond the reach of firelight and human guardians roamed dangers of a more primal nature. Forests beyond village lights teemed with wolves, their howls cutting through the silence, sending shivers through those who heard them. They lingered on the periphery, symbols of nature's untamed power, threats as real as they were legendary. Wolves were creatures of story, embodiments of fear and respect, their presence a reminder of humanity's fragile stronghold against the wild. Villages erected barricades, protecting against these four-legged marauders, while tales of wolfmen blurred the line between myth and beast, adding supernatural fear to already potent threats. In the fertile night, rumours of the supernatural took root and flourished. Night air seemed to carry spirits' whispers, existing just along the edge of perception. Superstitions held their sway, every shadow a potential spectre, each whisper a message from beyond. Communities practiced rituals, from hanging iron above doors to muttering incantations, warding off these unseen forces. Legends told of helpful spirits assisting those respectful of ancient customs and punishing those who strayed. Darkness, too, became the cover for human mischief. Thieves thrived under the night's anonymity, exploiting the shadows for nefarious gain. Driven by desperation or greed, they slipped through unsecured windows and down unguarded alleys, creating unrest as palpable as any other threat. These rogues knew the landscape like their own hands, turning the familiar into a haven for their deeds. Street patrols could deter only so much. Vulnerabilities lay in wait for cunning minds. Nighttime threats served as a reflection of village tensions, highlighting disparities and igniting fears of both tangible and abstract theft. Yet the same darkness that harboured tricksters also inspired communities to band together, organising guards to reclaim safety and trust. Under the cover of night, secrets could bloom. Clandestine meetings and whispered plans found sanctuary where daylight couldn't reach. Whether plotting political conspiracies or indulging in forbidden love, the night gave breath to private endeavours framed by secrecy. In shadow-shrouded groves and secluded alleyways, the thrill of concealment was intoxicating, yet fraught with vulnerability. These gatherings wove a tapestry of intrigue, painting the night with threads of mistrust and alliance. Amidst fear and mystery, many sought solace in prayer. For medieval society, the divine offered comfort against the insecurities of night. Candlelit chapels resonated with chants. Congregations gathered in shared faith, invoking celestial protection against dangers both spiritual and earthly. Inside homes, prayers whispered against the background of a crackling fire offered submission and hope, knitting belief into the fabric of survival. While a life by day obeyed terrestrial rules, at night the spiritual dominion took hold, drawing strength from above until daylight provided reprieve. Throughout this dark tapestry of mystery and fear, one truth remained steadfast. The dawn would come. Each morning's light fractured the midnight's hold, sweeping aside shadows to reveal a landscape of renewal and hope. The cyclical dance of light and dark became an anchor for those who weathered the medieval night. It brought life full circle, a reminder of everything endured and survived, as constellations gave way to the morning's golden hue. With every dawn, the world reawakened, and each morning was a triumphant testament to survival, a celebration of life rehashed from the night before. In the Middle Ages, death shadowed every life, lurking so persistently it seemed as elemental as air. From birth, mortality was an intimate companion, not a distant possibility. Life was fragile, threatened on all fronts by disease, starvation, treacherous childbirth, and the merciless violence of war. A brief existence was more common than not, cultivating an acceptance of death that feels foreign to us now. To live in this era was to share your days with death, acknowledging its certainty, not in fear, but in the routine acceptance of its influence on day-to-day existence. This ever-present menace shaped a culture rich in death rituals and beliefs. Funeral practices were not just burdens to bear, but essential ceremonies tangled with meaning and steeped in tradition. Bodies required fast burials to avoid disease, making these goodbyes swift yet sincere. Despite the rush, each affair brimmed with symbolism. acting as a conduit for communal grieving and spiritual stability, ensuring souls' safe passage while comforting the living. Mourning became a vital shared ritual, a reminder of each individual's fleeting journey, assuring them that death served as a mere portal to eternal realms. Amongst these customs, the spectre of the Black Death rises prominently, engulfing prior brushes with death in its cataclysmic embrace. The 14th century plague dismantled populations with ferocious speed, leaving desolate villages and echoing city streets. Beyond the physical toll, it tore at medieval society's core, ushering a new reckoning with death's sheer power and unpredictability. It reshaped how people saw life and death, imbuing fears with layers of religious hope for salvation amidst this apocalyptic reality. Art and literature bore witness to these horrors, filled with grim reminders of humanity's fragility, urging reflection on the ephemeral nature of life. The chilling image of the Danse Macabre, or Dance of Death, painted by medieval artists, illustrated this haunting relationship with mortality. These depictions showed skeletal death leading an inevitable march of all humans alike, from kings to peasants, emphasizing life's impermanence and the ultimate democratization by death's touch. Such art graced church walls, melding visual storytelling with moral instruction, cautioning viewers about their transience and encouraging a life of piousness as they braced for the afterlife's judgment. Yet, art was just one way in which the dim cultural winds breathed life into death's lore. Superstitions thrived, assigning meaning to every whisper and rustle. A dog's howl, an owl's screech, or even a comet blazing through the night became omens, tightly weaving together the worlds of earthly daily life and the mystical unknown beyond. The beliefs, though rooted in fear, provided context for tragedies waiting at every corner. Ghostly apparitions and stories of wandering spirits spun tales that influenced burial practices, all with an eye toward ensuring that the dead remained peacefully at rest. Death's intimate bond with life stretched across social strata, impacting peasants and nobles in stark contrast. For peasants, death was a common neighbour, exacerbated by relentless toil and scant resources, honoured with prompt burials born of necessity. Their funerals blended spiritual rites with local traditions, turning grief into communal resilience. Conversely, the nobility's demise inspired pomp and circumstance, emphasising status, underscoring heritage, and immortalising legacy through grand tombs and memorials. Such contrasts reveal a society where status dictated even the act of dying, mirroring the stratified order of daily life. Amidst these realities, religion intertwined seamlessly with mortality, offering both assurance and discipline. The Church wielded vast influence over perceptions of the afterlife, shaping views of heaven, purgatory, and hell as stages awaiting the soul's progression. Death wasn't just an ending, it was an urgent transition, pregnant with spiritual consequence dictated by earthly behaviour. Through religious rituals, masses, and clerical intercession, these beliefs suffused life with a sense of otherworldly justice, encouraging lives lived earnestly, lest one suffer eternally in the realms hereafter. Epidemics introduced further challenges, demanding pragmatic solutions like plague pits and mass graves to contain the death toll. Such unmarked burials stripped death of ceremony against the tide of necessity. Despite their anonymity, these pits retained dignity, resonating with communal prayers and blessings. They remain solemn testaments to the era's devastating mortality and resilient resistance. Battlefields too, where corpses often lingered under a war-torn sky, posed brutal reminders of conflict's dire costs. The dead laid in mass nearby graves received hasty rites, reflecting chaos but also a final note of respect amidst survival. In this tapestry woven from life and death, commemoration played a significant role. Monuments and effigies emerged as enduring threads connecting past and present. Whether crafted from wealth or simplicity, these memorials performed dual duties, preserving remembrance and asserting spiritual continuity. Soaked in memory, even common grave markers imprinted lives in history. These expressions of sympathy, be it through monumental or modest means, emphasised medieval society's focus on honouring lives both through spiritual and earthly dimensions. Ultimately, death presented itself not as a finite end but as a doorway to continuance. This belief, ingrained in medieval psyche, infused every aspect of life. It offered a template for existence, where moral virtue carried eternal weight and dying seamlessly paved the spiritual journey. Accepting death with a mix of fatalism and faith, medieval society faced life's uncertainties with remarkable resilience, seeing beyond the veil, finding comfort in eventual salvation's promised light.